Welcome back to the Pride of Detroit POD cast. If you want to join all the in-between fun, we are always live on Mondays at twitch.tv/Pride of Detroit. That might change in season, but during off-season, we're comfy on Mondays all the time. Let's move on to the rest of the positions. We spent our whole first segment talking about cornerbacks and DBs. Let's talk about the running back swap that kind of happened. So the Lions, to kick off free agency, signed David Montgomery for 3 years, $18 million, $11 million guaranteed, which I'm sure has made Jeremy kind of antsy.
Yeah.
Do we want to start there, or should we start like what happened after that, like what that signing meant and what eventually happened?
Let's start with what I want to start with what happened with Jamaal.
Okay. Let's start there. I agree, because that's the more recent thing. So I think as soon as the Montgomery signing happened, we all knew there wasn't a spot for Jamaal Williams on the roster anymore.
Right.
Which was a problem. Yeah, like
it was a surprise.
Like there's no way Jamaal was going to stay as RB3 at that point.
Right.
It was.
Yeah. I was going to say to set the stage for everything, as oftentimes is the case, the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
Right.
Like, especially when you have conflicting reports from a similar beat, with one person saying one thing and one person saying they heard the complete opposite thing. I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
Well, what you're talking about basically what happened is that Jamaal Williams then goes and takes 3 years, $12 million, 8.1 guaranteed with the Saints. And in his introductory press conference, it seems like he had some bad blood, unfortunately, with the Detroit Lions about that. Like, it echoed his words when he left Green Bay. So I'm wondering part of that might just be how he motivates himself. But it's clear that it seems like there was a contract negotiation breakdown.
Yeah. And let me get into it a little bit. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this
because I have my theory on what happened too, but let's see like what you get on that too.
First, let's set the stage about things that we know. We know that Jamaal was coming off a 2-year, $6 million. So they're already paying him $3 million a year. He has a phenomenal year. He has 1,000 yards, 17 touchdowns, all that. We know there was mutual interest in coming back. We know that they had started contract negotiations well before free agency even started. So with all that information alone, I do not buy at all the fact that they were not close at 3 years, $12 million. That makes no sense to me.
Can I say why real quick?
Yeah.
We'll talk about it, but look at the contract that Alex Anzalone got. The Detroit Lions take care of their own.
Right.
Yes.
So to me, I throw that report pretty much away. But like you said, Ryan, we're not dealing in absolutes here. We're not saying one side is right, one side is wrong. Both sides have a lot of reason to lie, so maybe the Lions are putting out that report to make them seem better. But what I've heard, not only from people like Dave is a guy that I very much trust, but from my own conversations, what I've heard, and again, I'm not going to treat this as...
And Kyle is somebody we really trust too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to be clear that. Thank you for saying that. I've heard that the Lions offered up to $5 million a year. And I don't know if that was a 1-year deal, a 2-year deal, a 3-year deal. Maybe that was part of the reason why they weren't able to come to an agreement. But that was not close to what Jamaal wanted. And so the report that
Jamaal
the Lions...
represented by Drew Rosenhaus, by the way, a very, very big agent in the NFL and one who is known for being aggressive. Yes.
So I think it can still be true that the Lions and Jamaal were far apart, even if the Lions were willing to give him $5 million a year. And if the Lions were willing to give him $5 million a year and Jamaal said no, that's insulting, then the Lions were right to move on from Jamaal Williams. I want to make that 100% clear. Because $5 million would have probably raised some eyebrows. I would have raised an eyebrow. Because I'm about to, when I transition this to David Montgomery in a minute here, I will say that turning down Jamaal Williams for whatever he wanted and then turning around and signing David Montgomery to $6 million a year, I can't completely circle that square. That does not make a ton of sense to me. And I'll get into why in a little bit, but I think the Lions did what was right with Jamaal Williams, and it shows a lot of things that I didn't know that this regime was capable of, because they gave Alex Anzalone a big deal, because they've at times it felt like overpaid for good character fits. This is not them anymore. They're willing and capable of drawing a line in the sand saying, hey, we love you. You're everything that we represent, but this is a business too. Like, we have to draw a line somewhere, and it sucks, but it is part of the business. And good teams recognize that that one player is not going to make or break the culture here. One player is not going to make or break whether, we can have talent at that position. And so, yeah, kudos to Brad Holmes for doing it. I mean, they're not the only team doing this sort of stuff, but it was something that I don't think we've seen Brad Holmes do before. Saying like, hey, this guy, like, here's a guy that is perfect for everything that we do in terms of on the field, off the field, but we're still not going to overpay. And that's progress. That's interesting.
Yeah, and the one other word that I want to call it is it's prudent. And I think that having the forethought to think, hey, you know what? We're comfortable giving Jamaal this offer. We're fine with him rejecting it because we have contingency plans. Like, I also appreciate the fact that the Lions said, we're not going to be left looking for a dance partner while Jamaal goes and tries to find a bigger contract somewhere else. And I think again, that's good business. I just have a really hard time understanding the disrespect part. I want to trust Jamaal, Chris. I want to validate his feelings, but at the same time, I'm having a hard time understanding why he felt disrespected.
I will just say this: it's very rare for a player to actually be a part of direct part of these kind of negotiations, and I can probably guarantee what like Jamaal is probably saying here. I'm not saying he's wrong, but he's probably taking whatever, Drew Rosenhaus or whoever is like handling negotiations is telling him in turn. There's probably a bit of telegraph here. And all I can think about, because I see the money that he got with New Orleans, and it's lower than what you just said, Jeremy. It's lower than $5 million a year. All I can think about is they came in so high that the Lions balked, moved to plan B very quickly, and the rest of the running back market hasn't matriculated that way. And so Jamaal's plan B, or Drew Rosenhaus's plan B for Jamaal, ended up being even less than what they wanted than what the Lions were offering.
Right.
Like I think the disrespect came is that the Lions went somewhere else pretty quickly, and then the rest of the market just fell off after David Montgomery.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think he's probably right to be frustrated, right? And when it's
frustrating. Negotiations are frustrating.
Right. And whether he should be directing his anger to the Lions or Drew Rosenhaus, I mean, he's not going to publicly trash his own agent.
He's not going to trash. No, but nobody should trash their own agent. Right. That's a hard job to do.
And so, yeah, I think it's probably a little misdirected anger, but I mean, at the same time, he lost out on a bag. I'll excuse him throwing some shit on the Lions.
Look, guys got to find their motivation however they can in this league too. It might not always be logical or right or correct, but that's what's going to get Jamaal up and working out in the morning. And he told us as much as himself, right, Ryan? Like, positive competition. Like,
right.
He wants fuel.
And I will say this is one of the few times I'll let Twitch chat bleed into the actual podcast, but I know that we were all big fans of bringing Jamaal back, but it was bringing Jamaal back at the right price. Like, he was absolutely a priority to re-sign for two reasons. One, the Lions need a dependable running back who can be reliable in terms of the best ability, which is
availability.
Thank you. And that is what David Montgomery represents. That's also what Jamaal Williams represents.
Yeah.
The other thing to address here is the Lions got a really good running back in David Montgomery, and they got a guy who I think can really, I think that he can unlock the next level to this offense because he can do it all.
Let me tee it up from something from our friend from Brett Whitefield. Per Fantasy Points data, he mentions this. David Montgomery was tied for the highest forced missed tackle rate among all backs with 125 plus carries, 0.31 with Nick Chubb. And that was behind the dog poo offensive line of the Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
Now, Ryan, he has this offensive line.
Yeah. He has this offensive line. Now, with that statistic, obviously, like, Montgomery's going to get a chance to flex one of his better attributes, which is breaking tackles, because he needs to in order to gain any yards behind that Bears offensive line. Here's the thing that I think people are really underrating, and you can go back to Jamal's time with Green Bay. His receiving numbers were quite good. I'm interested to dig a little bit deeper and see where Jamal fit in their passing game, because he did not fit into the Lions passing game. Like, I don't think the Lions utilized him as a pass catching back in the way that Green Bay did. And quite frankly, like, Jamal had some big time drops as well. So I think that with having David Montgomery in the backfield, here's what happens. The Lions become a less telegraphed offense. I think there were a lot of times last year where you saw Jamaal Williams on the field and you thought the Lions are running the football. When DeAndre Swift was in the game, it was the Lions are probably passing the football. David Montgomery on the field, it can go either way. And again, I want Jeremy to talk a little bit about David Montgomery too, but I think that having that guy who can do both things and also can be healthy and do it at a high level, and he's younger, that's why this regime probably paid a little bit of a premium to get one of the better backs that was available on the market. Like, Saquon goes off the market, Jeremy. I mean, David Montgomery's right there.
Yeah, and Jeremy, if the number the Lions wanted for Jamaal was 5, and they're spending $1 million extra for an upgrade, I know you're not big on the money or draft capital or anything going into the running back position, but teams do need to run the ball at times.
Yeah. Listen, 5 for Jamaal would have been a lot. 6 for David Montgomery, I think, is a lot too. And I know a lot of people look and be like, that's not even top 10 against in running back average per year. And that's true, but it is very high amongst that tier of running back that is RB 1B, right? Is a 1B or a 1A to, like, not the feature back. I don't think the Lions want David Montgomery to be a workhorse back that would require 8, 9, 10 million a year. And so $6 million is a lot. And listen, this is going to be the wet blanket portion. I promise I'll get back to being optimistic and excited about this team. And I also want to point out, before I get into this, nitpicking about $6 million a year is nitpicking. I'm nitpicking. $6 million a year is not going to hamstring this team from signing big contracts. It's not going to be very preventative. It's just not how I would spend my resources. Now, I think there's some things that are being exaggerated about David Montgomery's game. I think a lot of people just assume that the Bears' offensive line was trash the entire time he was there. Whether you like PFF grade or ESPN's run blocking grade, that was a top 5 unit last year. And if you don't believe me, look at Khalil Herbert's stats. That man ran for 5.8 a carry last year. And David Montgomery ran for 4.0. And I know they're different backs. I understand that. But that offensive line is a lot better than people think they were last year. In the previous years, not so much. I'll agree with that. Below average. Not worse than the league, but below average. The other thing I want to say is that I think a lot of people think Bears are a heavy running team. They have a running quarterback. People are stacking the boxes against David Montgomery all the time. Of course, his yards per carry low. Jamaal Williams faced 8-man boxes like 30% of the time to Montgomery's 23. So Jamaal had it worse last year and produced pretty much the same level, and has produced the same level over 5 years that David Montgomery is. And so I think there's a lot of projection. Listen, I like David Montgomery as a back. All the breaking tackles things are true. And Aiden Hutchins said it a month ago without being prompted. Like, that dude is tough to tackle. He's like a mini bowling ball. But I think saying, like, okay, put him behind the Lions' offensive line, it's going to be 5.0 yards per carry. That's a lot of assumptions. And I think it's not completely based in fact. I think he'll be better. And listen, I'll put it this way too, like I did on Twitter. And it's something I do believe. I think there's a good chance David Montgomery has not had his best statistical season yet. And I think it's very possible that Jamaal Williams has already had his. And the youth is important. he's going to have a better supporting cast, but his
to
supporting
that
cast
point,
was not bad last year. I think that's the point I want. And also having a guy like Justin Fields in the backfield who's taking attention away from you, that's probably going to help you too. You're not going to have that with Jared Goff this year. So he's going to be better. He is better than Jamaal, and he's younger, and those things matter. But I think people are a little bit exaggerating how much better he's going to be. I mean, how much better can you play that role than Jamaal did last year?
So here's the thing I wanted to point out, because I think you made a really good point for people who are big proponents and big fans of this signing of David Montgomery, is that you are not rewarding Jamaal for what was likely his best season that he'll have.
Right.
You are paying a guy who is younger, who has the upside.
Correct.
Right. So that's where I'll kind of leave that there.
The only thing I do want to point, and I think since we got to get to a lot more things, I don't want to argue too much with Jeremy, but I think we are seeing the sea change across the board in how running backs are used. There is no such thing as a feature back. So I agree with you that feature back money will stop being like a thing, but I don't think professional players are willing to give up what they are paid just because the scheme is going against them. Nobody wants to. Like, I understand everyone's time is basically getting cut in half on the field for running backs, but they don't want their pay getting slashed to a fraction of that at the same time too. So this is just what's good the market's going to be until we get to an age of very cheap running backs or whatever happens. I don't know. We're not there yet.
And to be clear, like I gave this move a C+, which is above average, by the way. I don't grade on an A, only A's and B's scale like every other grader. But I felt like David Montgomery needed to have a little bit more of an honest conversation, because I don't see anyone even criticizing really any of the Lions moves, let alone one that got as much, I don't know.
As we said, the Kool-Aid's off the charts.
It is.
The Kool-Aid is damn off the charts. Yeah, no, the only emotion that really came out of this move was people like immediately sad that it's basically that Jamaal was gone.
Yeah.
And then that emotion kind of like turned as soon as Jamaal opened his mouth too, which is, I don't think that's fair towards Jamaal. I just don't. He's allowed to feel whatever he is like. And he feels very happy about the Lions fan base still all the same.